The Dossier Report. Open up your mind. Democrats quietly explore barring Trump from office over January 6. In the years since the January 6 attack on the Capitol, a handful of Democrats, constitutional scholars, and pro-democracy advocates have been quietly exploring how a post-Civil War amendment to the Constitution might be used to disqualify former President Trump from holding office again. Calls for Congress to take steps to strip Trump of his eligibility, which reached a crescendo in the aftermath of the January 6 riot, have since decreased, but those who remain engaged on the issue say discussions about applying Section 3 of the 14th Amendment have been ongoing. If anything, the idea has waxed and waned, said Lawrence Tribe, a constitutional expert at Harvard Law School. I hear it being raised with considerable frequency these days, both by media commentators and by members of Congress and their staffs, some of whom have sought my advice on how to implement Section 3. An analysis by The Hill found that around a dozen Democratic lawmakers have spoken either publicly or privately over the last year about how Section 3 of the 14th Amendment might apply to those who engaged in insurrection on January 6. Among those whose offices have spoken recently with Tribe are Representative Jamie Raskin, who's a Democrat out of Maryland, who sits on the January 6 House Select Committee, Representative Jerry Nadler, a Democrat from New York, who chairs the powerful House Judiciary Committee, and Representative Demi Wasserman Schultz, who's a Democrat out of Florida. I continue to explore all legal paths to ensure that the people who tried to subvert our democracy are not in charge of it, Wasserman Schultz told The Hill. Nadler and Raskin did not respond to a request for comment. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which was ratified after the Civil War, says that the office holders who have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same are disqualified from future office. Raskin, a former constitutional law professor, served as a House manager during Trump's impeachment trial over his role in the January 6 attack. Days after Trump's acquittal in the Senate, Raskin discussed the constitutional provisions in a press interview, saying Trump was right in the bullseye middle of that group. The point is that the constitutional purpose is clear to keep people exactly like Donald Trump and other traitors to the Union from holding public office. He told ABC News on February 17th, adding that the legal mechanics would require more research. Most constitutional scholars who spoke to The Hill thinks the provision is not self-executing. In practical terms, that means applying Section 3 to Trump would require an additional step by lawmakers to make the 14th Amendment operative. Some scholars believe that Congress, by a simple majority in both chambers, could act on its own to find Trump engaged in insurrection, which would implicate the constitutional provisions. Under the 14th Amendment, restoring Trump's eligibility would then require a supermajority vote. Other experts like the Tribe of Harvard say Congress would need to go further, either by establishing a neutral fact-finding body to determine whether Trump engaged in insurrection under Section 3 or assigning that fact-finding role to a federal court. One bill introduced by Representative Steve Cohen, Democrat out of Tennessee, after Trump's Senate impeachment trial last February, would permit the Attorney General to make the case before a 3-judge panel that an office holder had violated the provision and should be barred from the future office. In addition to legislative discussions, other efforts have focused on pressuring state elections officials with a view toward private litigation over the issue. One pro-democracy group, Free Speech for People, has mounted a pressure campaign on top state elections officials to apply the 14th Amendment to Trump should he run again. Doing so would effectively bar Trump's name from appearing on their state ballots in 2024. This summer, the group sent letters to chief election officials for all 50 states and Washington, D.C., making the case that they have a constitutional duty to bar Trump from appearing on future state ballots. The group argues the provision doesn't require additional steps by Congress because the 14th Amendment is already operative by itself. Just as states are permitted, if not required, to exclude from the presidential ballots a candidate who is not a natural born citizen who is underage or who has previously been elected twice as president, so two states should include from the ballot a candidate such as Mr. Trump, who previously swore to support the Constitution but then engaged in insurrection. Their letter to Georgia's top election officials argue, and if the election officials don't comply, we intend to litigate the question, John Boniface, the group's president, told The Hill. So if a Secretary of State does not follow the mandate of Section 3, the 14th Amendment, we will bring this matter in court. But some scholars think such lawsuits could face serious hurdles and will likely face a challenge in the Supreme Court. If a Secretary of State declines to find Trump ineligible, it is far from clear who could challenge that determination, said Gerard Maglioka, a law professor at Indiana University, who noted that the state's law varies widely on the issue. According to Tribe, if lawsuits arose over Trump's eligibility in 2004, the outcome of that litigation would likely hinge on whether a neutral fact finder set up by Congress had previously determined that Trump's role in the January 6 attack triggered Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Absent that, a lawsuit by Trump challenging his exclusion from a ballot would stand a good chance of success, he said. Whether a push for Trump's disqualification under the 14th Amendment gains wider support or more legislative traction may turn on what the January 6 House panel ultimately reveals about his role. Once that committee makes clear, as I trust it will, that what took place was indeed an insurrection that triggers Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and that supports criminal prosecution by the DOJ of those responsible, it is difficult to imagine this not becoming a logical next step, the tribe said. So, do you believe that President Trump caused the insurrection? To me, I don't think he had anything to do with the planning of I don't believe he had anything to do with the planning of the attacks on the Capitol. I just believe he incited it. He stirred it up unbeknownst to himself, but by all of his hate speeches and his walking around saying whatever he wants, disrespecting people who are poor and those who are rich, he basically catered to the most. It was it was his backing of each group. The problem with Trump is he incited violence and incited division. You know, whether you want to agree or disagree with that, that was terrible. Now he did get some things passed that helped businesses and help some of the historical black colleges, but he just did that so he can get a vote. So he can get a vote, and then exonerated a he exonerated some black men and black women who were I believe in prison or jail. So to me, they're gonna have a hard time proving this, but they don't want to bring him back into power because if he was to come back in office, they're afraid of the incitement of division. Like, listen, they want division. They love when pink folk and black folks aren't mixing with one another. They rather do it where it would they rather do it where it's on the low. They don't like it being blatant. They like it being systematic or systematically racist instead of blatant racist. They don't want blatant racist because they'll lose too much money that way. So they would rather have it put in the system. And the way Biden has been, people are starting to see the truth. Is like, man, Biden ain't it. Well, that's what we tried to tell you. Like, he's no more better than Trump. Him and Trump are both full of it, but Joe Biden, he's damn sure full of more it to me than Trump. So let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you think an insurrection will be proven and bar him from ever running for president again? I don't think it will. I think he'll be able to run again, but because of his popularity and how they've destroyed his character, I don't know if he'll get a lot of votes. But things could change. People love Trump. They love the blatantness by him. So thank you for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, share this. Hit that notification bell to select all to receive upcoming notifications. And if you love what you hear, you can go to the description box. You can hit that link to my Cash App. You could donate $1, donate $1,000,000, or whatever you're willing to give. We'll accept. Thank you all for listening. And this is the Dazier Report. We are signing off. Peace.